All right, guys, welcome back after a little bit of a hiatus. Speed Up and Get Your Hits podcast. I'm Billy with SpecTrain. With me, as always, I've got Nick from Velox Training Group and Brennan from Gateway Defense. Fellas, welcome back. It's been a while. We've all been on the road, and I'll say this real quick as well. People have been asking, obviously, for more episodes. Really appreciate all the support and you guys being interested in the podcast. And I know you've been hitting up all of us wanting new episodes of the podcast. The deal is this. I kind of refuse to put out new podcast episodes unless we have something new that's valuable to talk about, or basically good ideas. And there's not going to be like filler episodes. We're not going to cover the same stuff over and over again. And so if you guys have questions or have things you want us to talk about, feel free to hit us up. Otherwise, we'll just be getting together hopefully and doing some episodes as we have good ideas or new things come up. But with that said, guys, thanks for being here. Appreciate you coming back. What you been up to, man? What you guys been doing in your personal training? What's new?
Been doing a bunch of rifle stuff. I think like more specifically, like trying to move very, very aggressively and, try to push the pace of the speed in which I'm shooting with rifle stuff, because I think it's really easy. Like, I think the one thing that like doesn't transfer over from pistol to rifle is like, if you're moving aggressively at 25 yards with a pistol, it's like, I should probably just stand still and shoot this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
With a rifle, it can 100% be done, and you can shoot very, very aggressively. And so, like, getting into or like becoming more and more comfortable with that is the shit that I've been practicing quite a bit. Shot a couple drills and like noticed, I'm like, man, like the dot is sitting there waiting on me. Why am I not shooting? It's like, oh, 'cause I shoot a lot of pistol,
right?
And it just feels like I shouldn't be doing that, but like for the rifle, you can 100% do it. So that's the stuff I've been messing around with, trying to move really aggressively and shoot as fast as I possibly can.
I'll tell you something that's super. We mentioned this. I think we had a conversation about this recently, but this may be interesting for folks. Something that's super interesting to me. You talk about like what transfers over between pistol and rifle. Like the confirmation levels and the visual side of it are interesting to me the more that I explore rifle as well. And in the sense that, like with pistols, when you have a target of a certain difficulty, typically you're going to use the same confirmation level on that target, whether you're doing a draw, whether you're doing a transition, or whether you're doing a split. Like what you kind of need to see on that target is kind of the same. So if you have like a confirmation 2 target or whatever, like you're going to see that dot float in and press the trigger as soon as it's in the A zone, crossing that perf, do the same thing as it comes back down and recovering in recoil. Rifle, I feel like you almost have to like sometimes use 2 different confirmation levels in the same target. So like, let's pick whatever target you want, but let's say you're trying to guarantee alphas at 25, right? In terms of splitting and recoil control, like that's pretty much a confirmation 1 target. Like you can pretty much just run the trigger and get alphas at 25, right?
100%.
But you can't do like a 0.3 presentation from low ready at 25. Like you have to like use a little. You have to almost like make sure you see the dot like stop like roughly in the center with the rifle, and then like once it gets there, like you switch confirmation levels and recoil control and just like kind of let it eat. I don't know if that makes sense. But it's an interesting difference.
No, I think it definitely does. Like, and that's the stuff that I've experienced too with rifle. Like, it's almost like, hey, get confirmation 2, and the rest is all going to be confirmation 1.
Right.
And you're just managing where the dot is.
Yeah.
And I would say it's like, for me, it's like that out to 40 to 50 yards. 50 yards on a really good day, 40 yards pretty much every day. It's like confirmation 2, smashes however many times you want.
Yep.
That's cool.
Yep.
I think the interesting thing with the rifle too, Nick, I don't know if you were saying that you were like shooting on the move at 25 with rifles, but moving and shooting with a rifle changes confirmation levels in a different way than it does with like pistol. Like I find like moving with a rifle affects like the dot disturbance more than it does with pistol, because with pistol I can float it out there, and like you're gaining a lot by extra points of contact for recoil control. But then as you move, you have to, at least I do, I have to change a little bit of how I interact kind of with a target and what I'm accepting as I'm being aggressive with a rifle. Like everybody can just kind of walk slow. But when you're really trying to gain some ground, I think it changes the confirmation levels a little bit. Pretty interesting.
So here's what I noticed with that, and I agree with you, but like, yes, the rifle does move more when you start moving, but since it's moving more, like you're more apt to start latching onto the dot with your vision and trying to control it back down to the spot. But like you have to like seriously resist the urge. Like for me, it's way easier to target focus with a pistol. There's a couple reasons why the rifle optics closer to your face, it's harder to see around. But yeah, the rifle dot is going to move way more than the pistol dot when you're shooting on the move. But like the more you can just like resist the urge to stare at the dot, the more you're like, oh, I could just shoot like predictive splits at 25, 30 yards while I'm shooting on the move. And it really isn't that big of a deal. But like, it's like you have to stare at a spot. The rifle is very unforgiving in that way.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I find it's like just different pacing too on the move. I don't know if you guys do the same thing, but like depending on the distance, like I find myself shooting a lot of pretty careful confirmation too, like on the move with pistols, as far as like really trying to get the dot back towards the center, on say stuff outside 10 yards, that kind of thing. With the rifle though, it's like once you see that dot, like in the A zone, just like pull the trigger twice really fast, and it's not going to go anywhere. It doesn't have unless your foot is like hitting the ground right then, like it's not going to go anywhere. And so it's different. It's interesting pacing for sure. But I did something pretty interesting different for the first time in our core rifle, which for folks that aren't familiar is like a pretty intro level carbine course, level 1 course. Just a single 1-day course. But we did confirmation 2 doubles at 25 on the 3-inch circles that I know Nick uses as well. But it was interesting because you can just get better visual feedback on what your rounds are actually doing, like when you're a little bit more up close, but it's still like a pretty difficult target. And that actually worked out really well. It's pretty interesting. But
pretty cool.
Yeah, good stuff. Brennan, you've been up to a lot, man. I would say if you want to, make sure folks know about your new ventures and so forth. But if you want to talk about what you've been doing in training and stuff too, love to hear it.
Yeah, sure. I'll get it out of the way. So don't work in Vortex anymore. That relationship ended pretty abruptly. So I am doing my own thing now. So I am teaching for my own company, Gateway Defense. Already got probably close to a dozen classes booked for next year. Going to be all over the country, coast to coast. Looking forward to that. Making a bunch of content for our YouTube channel. Just kind of doing the solo thing for the most part. Media side, do it with my buddy Justin. So doing the same kind of stuff, just for myself now, which is cool. As far as what I've been doing in training, really interesting stuff, and I'd be interested to hear your guys' opinion on some of this stuff as well. But essentially what I've been running into is in matches, I've been shooting with not nearly enough aggression. So we talk about shooting with aggression all the time. I am a fairly aggressive shooter, I think, just in general. Like I'm more of a hoser than I am a turtle, right? But I think I have gotten very used to like matches and practice being two very different things for me. Whereas in practice, I'm willing to push and I'm willing to be aggressive, and I think I'm okay. I know I'm very okay with missing the A zone when I'm pushing speed, right? And I've gotten good at that. But then in matches, I've gone to this place where I'm dialing it back so far that every shot is comfortable. And I didn't realize that I had been doing that until I was discussing it with Justin Anderson. And he was like, do you feel like on any given shot or any given target, like you're just pushing just a little bit to like that edge of being uncomfortable? I was like, no, I feel super, super comfortable on every single one. He's like, well, that's why I'm beating you by like 1.5 to 2 seconds on every single stage. And then he was like, because I don't feel that on any target. I feel a little bit uncomfortable. I was like, damn. Which is interesting because comparing just apples to apples, like him and me, like I'm in general a faster shooter than he is, right? And I was like, okay, so that is what I've been trying to kind of apply to practice. Staying aggressive even when I'm practicing in like match mode, and then transferring that over to stages. So I shot like a little league night the other night, worked on applying that same aggression. I think I was a little bit too aggressive. So I kind of swung the other way a little bit more on some of them. But the pacing felt so much better, and just my raw time was so much better. And I think it's going to be a lot easier to dial it back from there than trying to ramp it up. And then just trying to apply that same concept across different things. So for instance, like shooting on the move into a position, right? Like breaking the shot before you're settled into a position. I will tend to just wait until my feet are stopped and I'm stable to take the shot, versus like I can save, we put it on the timer, anywhere from half a second to 0.75 seconds, just shooting a little bit earlier. Even if I have to take a makeup shot and take that within 0.25, I'm still saving between 0.25 and 0.5 on every position where I'm shooting into it. So little things like that is actually like, I'm stoked to have like identified that, because now I feel like I have something that I can work on that's measurably going to improve my match performance. Yeah, that's what I've been working on. So pretty interesting stuff, because it didn't seem like it was something that I thought I struggled with, but it's cool to identify that I do.
A lot of good stuff there, man. I heard you talking about some the other night. Yeah, it's interesting trying to pick up on different strategies and like mindsets for how to approach stages and so forth. What I've always tried to figure out, try to tell people from the very beginning is like, man, try to figure out just how to go at like GM pace. Obviously, it changes a little bit depending on what your level is. But just figure out how to do it that fast, and then just keep doing it that fast and figure out how to get more points while you do it, right? Because if you do it the other way, you know, the idea of slowing down to get your hits, right? Like you said, dialing it back in order to get more points like that, to me, that's just not the move, you know?
It'll only get you so far.
But also it's like a value statement thing. So like what you just said was super cool about like shooting into position, right? How much that's saving you, half a second to 3/4, and what maybe you're risking a Charlie or two, right? To gain that half a second to 3/4. Totally worth it in most cases, but maybe not so much worth it if like once you've shot your way into that position, you're also giving up free Charlies and all the stuff that you're shooting standing still. Right. So it's kind of that balance. It's kind of that balance of picking the spots where you're going to be, you know, you're going to risk giving up a few points in order to buy back huge chunks of time, versus knowing all the places where it's like, man, having a, having a 200ths faster split on this target is not worth it, Charlie. Right. That kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's that idea of, I think I've struggled with this forever, but the idea of throttle control, like appropriate throttle control, and tying that both to confirmation levels and like split speed, but also movement, and putting them all together. It's difficult to do that. But like you said, if you can plan on those targets that, yeah, I'm going to essentially spend a little bit more of my risk here. Yeah, like a 3/4 of a second is definitely worth it. So
yep.
And lot to play with.
I think where a lot of people go wrong there too is like they're going like, hey, I'm going to try to speed up, but the only thing they speed up is the shooting, and then the result like completely sucks, right? And it's like,
yes,
don't speed up the shooting, man. Like speed up everything else. Speed up the transitions. Speed up the movement, because that's the stuff that is going to make the stage a whole lot faster. It's not really like, hey, I mean. At least not at like a local level, right? If you're splitting the gun faster, it's like, that's not the big ticket items that's going to make stuff a whole lot faster.
Agreed.
It's pretty cool, but yeah, I mean, splits are the coolest, if we're being honest. But Good stuff. Yeah, so I've been doing a lot. Sometimes a lot, and sometimes not a lot. I'm actually still. I think I'm finally coming out of it, but I've had some real tendonitis in my support hand. I've been working through, trying to rest that some. But had a lot of I've been doing a lot of teaching and some matches, and ended up having to do a build drill rematch a couple weeks ago that I put some training in on. I'll talk about build drills here in a little bit, but mostly more of the same. Whenever I have been able to get some training in, nothing super interesting there. What I thought would be interesting for us to talk about, we've talked a lot about, obviously on the show, guys, how to train. And that's, I think, mostly what our classes are about as well. How to train, man. How to actually, use the time that you're putting in on the range, the time you're in shooting, to actually get better, to actually analyze the the processes of what you're doing and figure out where you have room to grow, figure out what you need to change and experiment, and how to get better. It is in the shooting world, on social media especially, it is always just constantly apparent to me that people are shooting a lot of drills without having any idea what they should be getting out of them. Is kind of what I thought we would talk about tonight. There's a lot of good drills out there, right? And drills have value, and I think even having some good standard times on there, or having an idea of what's possible with those drills, 100% can be valuable, right? Because it helps you have an idea of where you're lacking or where you have room to grow. But for the most part, I think people will be super surprised. Like I shoot, build drills as an example in my classes. I think probably both of you guys do as well. I'm not super sure which classes and so forth, but like people are often surprised, like until maybe the end where we do like one scored run, like for the standards or whatever. Like when you shoot build drills in my class, like you don't get to find out what your time was. Like, because we don't care, it's like, so what are the points of these drills, and what should we get out of them? And I'll start with that, right? So for what I always say on the bill, as an example, we did a whole episode a while back, guys can go listen to, on doubles, and kind of what the point is on that. And that's a super foundational drill where you work on, obviously, grip, recoil control, trigger, vision. Like there's a lot of things you're working there. And I like to say that once you kind of figure things out in doubles, that sort of pressure testing all of those skills against longer strings of fire is super useful. When you make the string longer, you're essentially just making everything more difficult. It's more opportunities to become visually distracted, right? It is more opportunities for pressures to change in your hand. It's more opportunities to feel that recoil coming back into your hand and being like, oh, I don't like that. I'm going to try to lock that gun back down more with the firing hand, that kind of thing. So it's more opportunities for things to go wrong. You have to be more squared away to maintain everything that you're doing through that process. So for the most part, where as a part of a learning experience, I'm having folks shoot a build drill. It is, hey man, not a pace thing. Here's what I need you to see, right, in your sight package based upon target difficulty. Here's how you should be pulling the trigger. Let's see if we can do that through a string of fire as long as, say, 6 rounds, without letting your eye start following the dot, without starting to clamp down with your firing hand, without having any of those issues creep in. And yeah, the results are interesting in terms of like, what do your hits on target tell us anything about that process, right? Start seeing your hits climb up into the right. I'm like, okay, well, there's that vision issue, creeping in. Or if they go low left, there's that grip issue, creeping in, right? That's where results are helpful to kind of show us where the differences in the process are. But for the most part, it's a diagnostic drill of those fundamentals. So it's interesting. I saw a video. What kind of inspired me to talk about this a while back, which was like, hey man, like I see guys, like a build drill is supposed to be done in 2 seconds, and I see guys all the time. They're trying to shoot these build drills and get 1 under 2 seconds, and they can't even get like 3 or 4 shots off under 2 seconds. So we should really just start Like, see if you can shoot 2 shots in under 2 seconds, and then see if you can shoot 3, and then see if you can shoot 4. And like, let's see how many rounds we can consistently shoot under 2 seconds. And it's like, that's not the point of it. The point is not to see how many rounds you can get under some arbitrary threshold. It's to see what can this exercise show you about what you're doing behind the gun, and whether you're kind of executing those skills correctly, in my mind. Now, eventually, right? Again, switching to, in my mind, eventually a results-based focus can be helpful eventually, right? So like, this build drill competition as an example, right? Like when I'm trying to get like sub, 1.2 build drills, like that's causing me to try things that I probably would have tried otherwise. Right. So like trying to find new levels of performance can eventually, like, I guess, cause innovation, is the best way that I can describe it. Right. It can push you to try new things and experiment more and get uncomfortable. So again, having those, standards and pars and so forth can eventually be helpful. But that's kind of an example, I think, of a drill folks misunderstand and kind of what they're looking for, what they should get out of it. What do you guys think on the build drills? Is that a decent explanation, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, dude, people will like default to chasing the time. And it's like, they'll just try to hammer it out. And it's like, yep, it'll probably happen one day, right? Because you're constantly hammering on this thing. But it's like, you could probably get there a whole lot sooner if you would just like pay attention to like the proper things that you should be paying attention to. What does your grip feel like? How's the gun behaving? Are your eyes locked onto a specific spot? Are you dry firing in a way that's conducive to, faster splits, stuff like, are you dry firing realistically, hard words, stuff like that, instead of just like, hey, I'm just going to try and get a 2-second build drill. It's like, well, I mean, I could try to make my truck behave like a Ferrari, but it probably won't. You know what I mean? Like, I probably need to go buy, I need a Ferrari to go do Ferrari shit.
Right.
So like, in other words, like, you need to be paying attention to like specific things that are going to get you there rather than just the times.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I agree with
that concept of hammering it out, man. It is, I think it's well put. I mean, dudes will pick a drill and just, again, it's like, man, if I shoot this enough times, I'm eventually going to get good at it. And in some cases, like, you're correct. Like, reps do, if you just take a bucket of bullets to the range, like, it's pretty hard not to get better. Right. But you could, like you said, you could shorten that learning curve dramatically by actually paying attention to what you're doing in the process of it and trying to fix stuff intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
I think a good example of that is like, so, I mean, I like having a fast build drill as much as anybody else. But like what I did was I used build drills to figure out firing hand tension. Right. And because I was figuring out how to do some like pretty nasty splits in doubles. And then I was stringing it together in a build drill. I was getting all kinds of like trigger freeze and stuff like that. I'm not saying like I have completely eliminated trigger freeze out of my shooting, but I know how to eliminate it completely. And I got there by shooting like a F load of build drills. Honestly, stringing 6 shots together, like you're saying, it gets exponentially harder when you make the course of fire longer. That was like what I used build drills for, was to just figure out how to move the trigger finger fast and without any like hiccups. And in the course of doing that and shooting a bunch of build drills, I also figured out that I could shoot build drills way faster than I used to be able to, and took like a solid 3/10 or more off of my fastest build drill time, just messing around with firing hand tension. And yeah, that's still when I get my best results, is focusing on the process, and the results kind of speak for themselves. So yeah, I think you're spot on with that.
Yep, that's cool. What do you guys have any other? What are some of the big drills you see folks shooting that are either you think are misunderstood, or folks just don't really understand what they should be getting out of those drills?
I would say doubles.
Yeah.
But it's going to be similar to like the bill drill talk, but like maybe some similarities. But like when people shoot doubles, like you'll see dudes like, oh, I kept them all in the alpha at 7, and it's like, no, sir, like that is not the goal here, right?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
if you're shooting doubles and it's all over the alpha at 5 to 7 yards, I would not call that controlled at all. I would call that like a lot of really bad things happening,
Yeah.
in regards to like the types of input that you're putting into the gun, watching the dot and all that stuff. Doubles, like if you're looking at the results, like a good result would be concentric around the spot that you're looking. But like I think doubles as a drill should just be used as a way to diagnose what is actually happening with your grip and your vision, right? Like, are you putting extra input into the gun, or is your grip like super durable to where you could just like look at a spot, bang on the trigger, and like bullets just go to that spot? Are you burning a hole in that spot with your vision, or are you starting to watch the dot? How does the gun feel in your hands? Is it doing that whole like fishtail thing that I think is fairly common anyway? And then once you're done shooting it and paying attention to all that stuff, and you walk up to the target, does the target match what you thought it would actually look like? And if not, I would say you need to start paying attention a whole lot more than what you're currently doing. But like, again, doubles is not just like, hey, all alphas, or damn, I dropped a Charlie. It's like, honestly, I really don't care. Like, if I start backing up 25, 30, 40 yards and I drop a Charlie, I'm not terribly concerned with that, as long as it's like concentric around the spot that I'm looking.
Right.
And like looking on the target, I'm trying to look for trends. And like if you see a trend, like that, seatbelt thing where you have like a diagonal group across the target, it's like, yep, you're probably watching the dot lift, and because of that, you're no longer locked onto a spot, and now you're like shoving on the gun and blowing right by the target that you're actually trying to hit. So I think like using that as a diagnostic tool instead of just like, hey, I saw this shit on the internet and like people said it's good to go do, let me just like try it. Like use it as a way to diagnose all of that stuff, grip and vision.
Yeah, doubles doubles is super interesting too, in that it's like, to me, I don't know if you guys have the same take on it, but to me, doubles is almost useless if it doesn't start with trigger control at speed. Yeah. Like if you can't slap a trigger without moving the gun, then doubles is not going to teach you anything.
Dude, 100%.
Because so and so basically the idea is in doubles, like no matter what, the first shot of the doubles should always go right where you want it to go, because you're basically letting yourself start with a confirmation 3 trick sight picture, right? So what's going to be super educational is where does the second one go in doubles. But if you have 2 that are going crazy every time, then that's not telling you a whole lot. You just don't know how to pull the trigger, right? So it's funny how sometimes those things just like really have to be layered or they kind of fall apart.
Yes. I think the thing that I would add to doubles too is just that idea of vision, because I think a lot of people are approaching doubles. They see it done, and so they're like, okay, so essentially I hold the gun out here, pull the trigger twice as fast as I can, and essentially what they're doing is like the old like LE like hammer pair, right? Where it's like, well, to pass your qual at 3 yards to get under the par time, all you have to do is hold the gun in front of your face and pull the triggers twice as fast as you can. 1 sight picture, 2 trigger pulls. Whereas with doubles, when you're doing it correctly, you are getting information from every single time the gun recoils, and you should be able to, analyze your shot pattern essentially without even looking at the holes in the target, right? And I think a lot of people are not doing that when they shoot the doubles. Like they're just holding the gun out there and smacking it twice and just kind of seeing what happens. And like you said, they're just kind of measuring success off of whether or not they're in the A zone at freaking 5 yards. And it's like, damn, I hope they're in the A zone at 5 yards, right? So yeah, it's like a little minor thing that you almost can't tell just from watching a video of someone do it. But if you have shot with that level of visual precision before, you know there's like a whole ton that's going on that like Instagram videos won't translate.
It's hard. It's hard to make a video on it. It really is.
Hard.
Like it really is.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very hard. Yes.
Yeah, it's very hard to, and I think because even if you teach it perfectly, shooters' perceptions of what they are doing with their vision are often not correct. like you can explain target focus until you're blue in the face, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm target focused," and you tape over the front of their optic, and they're like, "I can't see anything." You know, you're like, "Well, there you go." You know.
Which is why so many instructors default to technique-based training plans, of just like, I'm going to show you how I do this, because it's a lot easier, honestly. Like there's a lot of things that I'm tempted to do that with. But if you can teach somebody the concept, then they have the tools to go freaking figure that out. And like, I don't know about you, I've had a lot of people like message me afterwards, be like, "Hey, you know that thing we talked about? Like, I just figured that out today." It's like, hell yeah, dude. Like, that's awesome.
Yes.
And it took them a bunch of work to get there.
Yep. That is the idea. There's no way around that work, unfortunately.
Yeah.
No.
I think the drill for me, I guess it's not a specific drill, but it's the way that most classes teach target transitions. So most of them will teach it, and I even have a rep of this in my curriculum, right? But you have targets that are like, if you've got all the targets set up on the line, you just take 2 of those targets or 3 of those targets, and they're essentially just shoulder to shoulder, and you're teaching target transitions at 5 yards because, you know, the closer you get, the wider they are, whatever. And so people are doing target transitions and just, you know, pop, 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 you know, and they're trying to figure out, I think most people understand that they're trying to drive down that split time between, you know, shot 2 and 3 and shot 4 and 5, right? Most people understand that. But they usually, I think, at least a lot of instructors do, they default to just using the timer to tell them whether they're doing target transitions correctly, which is a way of helping you figure out some of what's going on, granted. But that tends to be the end of how they teach target transitions. And so then people leave those classes and they think that, oh, I'm going to work target transitions. And they're essentially shooting things like LPRES at 5 yards, and thinking that that is about what is involved in a target transition. Whereas I think if you could teach, you know, to somebody to shoot the same drill, like target transitions at 5 yards gets super difficult. If you were going to hold a student to the double that Nick was talking about, where it's not, you know, minute of A zone, it's like an inch or 2 apart, you know, your shots, and you're picking spots on really big, wide open targets that have nothing else to look at. And you still have to keep up and transition within, you know, let's say, you know, 0.2 or 0.1819. That's super difficult to do. Again, it's a very small thing that is different kind of about your vision and how you understand target transitions and the fact that they're just tied to confirmation levels inherently. But that's what I see a lot of people doing. And it's funny because if you get a shooter who's been shooting for a while, trained for a while, they come to your class, you ask them what you want to work on. Like the 2 biggest things they say are like transitions and movement, right? Because they've realized that those are things that they just aren't good at. But the transitions thing, there's so much to unpack there. And I think a lot of it is kind of how it's getting taught, and people, again, just not really knowing what to look for. I don't know. That's been my experience. What about you guys with that?
I'll be honest, man. To me, and I'm not trying to sound super spicy, but like if it comes off that way, I'm okay with it. I think the way a lot of instructors teach transitions gives me fucking straight heartburn, man. It's like they just make it about the mechanics. And then they'll bust out, you know, C-zone steel or something like that. And then it's like, then that thing just becomes about timing. Like that guy will shoot that a couple times, get the timing issue down. And then they're like, sweet, I'm good at it. And it's like, no, you're not giving him anything to work on when he leaves here. Like it should 100% be about the visual piece, not freaking shoving on the gun and the timing of it. Like transition should be like speed with control.
It's predictive transitions.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
essentially.
it's like it's complete horseshit to me. And like, you know,
You're just getting lucky.
Here lately, I've had a lot of guys like, well, what do you think about the 80-20 transition? I have no clue where this is coming from, but like push 80% and then allow that last 20% to like, you know, glide into place. And I'm like, I mean, obviously at some point you're going to have to put some juice on the gun, I think, like when you get a little bit better. But like in the very beginning, just make it about the visual stuff. How do I get the gun to show up on the spot, you know, nice and precisely? But like, I think focusing on, hey, like telling an entire class, like, hey, push 80% and let the last 20% just like float in. It's like, dude, those guys are just going to make it about the mechanics and not the visual stuff. And they're not going to see anything.
Plus, like, frankly, I just think assigning numbers like that is just wrong, because like you can't tell me that on a wide, like 180-degree transition, that you're gonna throw a Glock 19 and a 2011 open gun the same way.
Right.
No.
Like when you have a gun that's double the weight, you have to put on the brakes like way earlier. Right? So like trying to say like this is how far you drive the gun before you put the brakes on, I'm like, you're full of crap, man. Like that's not how that works. And there's other variables too, like how long are your arms and stuff. But anyway.
Well, and those percentages are just a way, I think, for instructors to have like their way to do it too. Like I've literally sat there and listened to instructors talk about the difference of 80-20, like 85-15, 90-10, 95-5. I'm like, really, dude? Like, no. like explain what you want people to do. Like slow down at the end so the dot arrives softly or whatever. But like you said, it's not quantifiable at all. Same thing with like grip pressures or whatever the hell they're using these arbitrary numbers for. They're just making them up.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know how you guys start transitions off in your classes, but typically what I do is like I have them load the gun, remove the magazine. On the beep, you're going to shoot one target, look at the next target, pick a spot on the next target, and then motor the gun over there and press the trigger. And since that second trigger press is dry fire, like you can't lie to yourself anymore. Like you see how the dot arrives on the target. You see if you like over muscled the gun to the target. You see if the gun showed up on the target before your eyes did. I think that's the important shit about transitions, and not so much like, hey, you should shove it 80% of the way or whatever number you want. Like you could tell, like you guys know just what I do. Like you tell people 90%, they're going 120. they're gonna give it 120.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
It's good for people to understand too. Like this transition specifically are one of those areas where it's like, man, anything that I'm gonna go do like in my personal training, like if I went to the range to work on transitions for the most part, none of those drills or setup could I bring to a class, just due to space and resource requirements, right? I think a lot of folks get so wrapped around the axle of like the drills they saw like an instructor doing in class, and that is the way to train that thing, without understanding that we're just like racking our brains and like, man, I've got like 4 yards per student and like 2 target stands. How can I like set up a drill, right? Like when I go to the range, if I'm setting up designated target, like there's a target on the left 180, a target on the right 180, and like 6 in the middle, like at different distances. And it's like, I can't do that for 20 folks, you know, like it don't work that way. And so, yeah, transitions are one of the things specifically where it's like, it's pretty difficult to set up effective training for it in a lot of, you know, base sizes and classes and so forth.
But what I know, like all three of us do, is that even if all we've got to work with is 2 targets right next to each other, like we're still going to hammer in the idea of, hey, man, you're super close to this target. It's wide open. They're right next to each other. Doesn't take much effort to move the gun. Let's focus on picking spots on that wide open target that's super difficult to do at speed.
Yep.
And we're going to teach the concept that will play into like the setup that Billy just described with, you know, hold bait yourself to work on transitions. You're doing the exact same freaking thing, just, you know, with a lot more complexity. Yeah, like you said, versus just teaching the mechanics. Well, here's how I drive with my knees and tighten my core and, you know, whatever. It's like, okay, like you're kind of missing the point, right? That's all I got. All of the transitions are wrong.
All of the transitions are wrong. Yeah.
It for real gives me heartburn, man. It does. I see this shit and I'm just like, oh my God. It's like messing everyone up that's at your class right now. It's so bad.
Like
So
I would
bad.
rather they just left it out and just did stuff on one target, because it would be so much easier to teach people the right way to do it.
Yeah, it's tough because, like, you know, again, and part of that is where, like, we're seeing stuff, you know, for a long time we saw stuff like passed down over and over again, like on the military side of the house, and it got weaker and weaker. We're seeing the same thing now on the performance side. So like, you know, I think, you know, concepts back in the, you know, that started off back in the day is like, hey man, as soon as your sights lift from the target, like immediately be leaving and like be ready to shoot as soon as your gun lands on the next target. And by the way, if you're doing that on two targets that are right next to each other, that's not really a transition. You're just recovering your sights and recoil to a slightly different spot. So it's not even really a transition. It's just like a slight visual move, but like it's going to sound like 4 shots on one target. All of a sudden, like, oh, it sounds like 4 shots on one target. All of a sudden now we have like, oh, all your transitions should sound like splits, like no matter what, you know, and like we're going to figure out. Like I literally heard an instructor recently saying, "Hey man, if I slow down my splits to where it is the same speed as the transition, I'll be faster overall." And I was just like,
dude,
like what?
I watched a YouTube video the other day from a guy that shoots single stack. He's an instructor, and like, I'm like, what is this nonsense, dude?
Yeah,
it's just complete horseshit. Like,
yeah, dude, I remember when I like when that clicked for me and made sense for me, because like I was taught transitions like the wrong way, and it was all just cadence based. And I remember one day when I was like, I'm shooting these like, you know, 2 targets at like 7 yards, and they're maybe, you know, 3-4 yards apart. So it's a decent transition. And I was like, but I cannot move the gun fast enough to match my split speed. I was like, I just can't, because I'm splitting that at like a 15 or a 14. And like the very fastest transition I could ever like pull off was like a 19. And I was like, well, that's not good enough, right? And it was before I learned that, like, it was as I was learning about conformation levels, and I was like, oh shit, like I could still have a conformation 1 to this target at 7 yards. And the timer is not going to look like it's, you know, it's not going to be perfectly tied to the splits here. I remember when I found that out for the first time, it was literally in practice. I was like, holy shit. Like that had been so ingrained into me at every shooting class I'd taken that talked about cadence. Like, all right, that's it. Like that is the ultimate goal. And it really messes people up when you just take the targets and just like move them apart.
Well, you know, a lot of the things that we do in training, like our good training strategy, we wouldn't do at a match, right?
100%.
Like, there's a lot of examples of that. This that you're talking, like, that's not even a good training strategy. Like, none of that shit transfers to actual good shooting.
Correct.
All that transfers to is just like people shoving the gun around and dragging on and off the targets because you're trying to make it all the same split.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
I need to go eat. I'm gonna go eat some Tums after this conversation.
We've
Gets me fired up, man.
We've done a lot of done some complaining tonight, but hopefully folks see where it comes from a good place.
It does.
And
we're just trying to make life easier.
It's helpful. We've provided provided some solutions. Well, it's funny you say easier, man, because like that's what people get looking for. A way to make it easier is what like leads you to so many of these headaches, right? People, it would be. I say this in class all the time, man. It's like it would make life so much easier on you guys if I could just be like, "Thus saith the Lord, here's how you will grip a pistol if you want to be a good shooter." Like that would be awesome if I could do that, but that would be completely just full of crap. And unfortunately, like you there's no substitute for putting the work in and figuring that stuff out for yourself. So go forth and do the work and experiment and pay attention to what you're doing. And focus more on processes than results, and you'll probably get better results if you stop paying attention to them quite so much.
Agreed.
Cool.
Yep.
That's about what I got, fellas. You got anything to add on that?
I thought that was good.
Good. All right. Well, in that case, all of our information will be below, folks. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Speed Up and Get Your Hits.